Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear you will testify the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Kindly make your way up here. Please watch that cord there and the step. Please have the seat there and speak to the microphone. And thank you, Mr. Reardon.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Sir, could you please state your name and spell your last name?
Lance Thomas Martini, Martini.
And state your employment.
I am self-employed as the owner and operator of Paradigm Forensic Services.
And were you engaged to provide a review and an expert opinion and analysis relative to the circumstances surrounding the shooting on November 29, 2012 at the Heritage Middle School in East Cleveland, Ohio?
Yes, I was.
And how was it that you were engaged in this particular case?
I was contacted originally by Dr. Ron Martinelli, asked if this was something that I might be able to offer some expertise on. After discussion with him, it appeared as though that I could, and therefore I was officially retained.
So have you and I ever met before?
Prior to face-to-face, just recently, yesterday in fact.
Yesterday. And have we had any cases in the past together?
We have not.
Okay. And we spoke on the phone after you were retained in this case through Dr. Martinelli's team?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Could you please explain to the court your educational background?
Certainly. I hold a Master's of Science degree in Forensic Science and a Bachelor's of Science degree in Biology.
And do you recall the years of your, I know you're not that good on years, you told me, but you have a recollection as to when you graduated from college and what college that was and when you got your master's degree?
Yes, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm not real good on dates. I believe my Bachelor's of Science degree was received in 1978 from San Diego State University, and my Master's of Science degree was received in, I think it was 1980, 1979, 1980, somewhere in that time period from National University.
If you could try to keep your voice up just a little bit.
I will.
And you may have to lean forward to speak into the microphone. I don't know if anyone else is having any difficulty hearing. Your Master's of Science degree is in any particular specialty?
It's a general Master's of Science in Forensic Science, covering a number of different disciplines.
Okay. And could you please review with the court what your employment history has been?
I served 20 years as an employee of the La Mesa Police Department as a reserve police officer. My official appointments included a firearms training officer position for a period of 13 years, which also included department armor and firearms instructor. For the full 20 years of employment, I also served as a reserve police officer specializing in forensic matters such as criminal investigations, shooting investigations.
And that was your tenure with the La Mesa Police Department?
That is correct.
Could you give us, did you ever hold the title of criminalist while working at La Mesa Police Department?
Correct. Depending on what part of the country you're from, sometimes you're described as a criminalist, sometimes others as a forensic scientist. For most practical purposes, those terms are interchangeable.
Okay. And what was the nature of your duties as a forensic scientist? That sounds better to me.
Okay. My forensic science aspects included the investigations of law enforcement shootings, officer-involved shootings, situations where you had firearms-related evidence, or on one occasion I also remember unintentional or accidental discharge that occurred during the apprehension of a suspect.
And Other than your work with the La Mesa Police Department, any other employment besides that?
Yes, I was employed by the San Diego Sheriff's Regional Crime Laboratory for a period of 7.5 years. And during that time period, I was assigned the title of Criminalist 2 and assigned to the Firearms Analysis Unit as well as the Crime Scene Investigation Team.
What would be your duties as part of the Firearms Analyst Unit?
I was responsible for the analysis of firearms-related matters, the physical examination, evaluation of that evidence, and the production of reports in terms of the results of my analysis. I was also assigned to be the primary trainer for new criminalists coming into the Firearms Analysis Unit, so that I was responsible, directed and was responsible for the majority of the training for new forensic scientists coming into the unit.
So when you were performing those duties in the Firearms Analysis Unit, would you from time to time make comparisons of bullets and cartridge cases and tool marks?
That was one of my primary duties, yes.
Did you have any experience in ejection patterns of weapons?
Extensive, yes.
Cartridge cases and the like?
Yes, I did.
How about wound ballistics?
That was part of the analysis, generally more related to the crime scene investigation analysis than the firearms analysis unit.
And what about trajectory analysis?
Again, part of my work, yes.
Was that in the Firearms Analysis Unit or the Crime Scenes Investigation?
There's a certain amount of overlap between the two.
Okay. So you've done trajectory analysis, distance determinations. I'm reading from your CV. I just don't know these things.
Yes, yes.
You did testing on gunshot residue?
Correct.
And did you do reconstruction of shooting incidents?
On a regular basis, yes.
And as a member of the Crime Scene Investigation Unit, what were your duties there?
And part of my formal duties in terms of responding to a crime scene as part of the laboratory unit, I would respond to a shooting scene along with the homicide investigators. That was a designation for our investigative team for the Sheriff's Department. I was responsible for the identification, the documentation, and ensuring the proper collection of firearms-related evidence. As such, at the scene, I would work with investigators as well as other individuals from the crime laboratory and the medical examiner's office, such as a medical examiner, the other elements of the lab that were present, other individuals, included people from trace, maybe forensic biology, also known as DNA, other areas such as that.
So you were part of the CSI team, that's the acronym for the Crime Scene Investigation Team?
CSI standing for Crime Scene Investigation. Pretty much it was a, if you look at it in terms of being a multidisciplinary unit.
Okay. And could you give the court just a brief example of a case? Let's say there was a homicide. Would you be called out to the homicide to investigate?
Certainly.
And what would your duties be as part of the CSI team?
As part of the CSI team, I would respond as being the representative from the Firearms Analysis Unit. As I mentioned before, I would be there to help identify, document, and assist in the collection of firearms-related evidence. As such, we would work with the medical examiner. Under California law, the homicide investigators aren't allowed to touch or move the body prior to the appearance of the medical investigator and or the medical examiner. The medical examiner would work in conjunction with the investigators, homicide investigators, and the laboratory team to properly document the evidence on and around the body before moving it. As the medical examiner examined the body, gave some initial impressions as to possibly the cause of death or at least the location of wounds. That would be information that I would be working with also. when the body was moved, depending on the nature and aspects of the investigation, if there was any concerns about gunshot residue, distance determination. Oftentimes it was the sheriff's policy to remove clothing from the body at the scene, properly document and package it there for further analysis. The body would be then moved in conjunction with the medical examiner's office to the medical examiner's office for subsequent autopsy. Following my return to the laboratory, generally within 1 or 2 days, I would attend the autopsy, observe the autopsy, communicate with the medical examiner, sometimes in terms of specialized wound ballistics in my area, maybe firearms operability, handling characteristics, or gunshot residue production at specific distances, working with medical examiner. Once the autopsy was completed, we would await for the autopsy report. And during this process, there was also from the Sheriff's Department an evidence technology technician present who would photograph the autopsy throughout its entire stage and collect evidence as necessary. This information and evidence would be returned to the Sheriff's Department. I would then proceed to examine all of the firearms-related evidence within the laboratory, write my reports in reference to the evidence analysis only, specific to the evidence analysis. Oftentimes in a shooting event, I would be requested to produce a comprehensive shooting reconstruction, at which point I would work with my own analysis in conjunction with reports maybe from DNA, maybe blood spatter interpretation, it could be trace evidence. I would take my work, combine it with the work of other experts in their respective fields, and then based on their reports and communicating with those experts, produce a comprehensive shooting reconstruction based primarily off the physical evidence aspects.
So are you telling us that what we asked you to do in this case, you've done it before professionally in San Diego?
Many, many times.
Did there come a time when you were also in charge of this, the CSI team, or in charge of training new people that were coming into that unit?
As part of my duties as a primary trainer for the firearms analysis unit, I was responsible for training those firearms criminalists in the crime scene investigation aspects of the job. It's important to note that not all firearms examiners do respond to crime scenes, and not all of them have the additional training necessary for crime scene reconstruction.
Okay. So you did that from what, June of 1999 to December 2006?
That sounds correct, yes.
And what was your next employment after that?
Well, actually, during that time period, I had initiated my own company, Paradigm Forensic Services, although while I was working for the San Diego Sheriff's Crime Laboratory, I had to be very selective in terms of what work I took on. So those two employment events occurred simultaneously.
So would it be a fair statement then from January of 1997 to the present, you've had your own private business of Paradigm Forensics Services?
Forensic Services, that would be correct, yes.
Okay. And in that capacity, you continue to operate as a criminalist and a firearms criminalist?
That is correct, yes.
And would it be a fair statement then that you continue to do ballistics comparisons?
That is one aspect of the work I do.
And what else?
I do pretty much the same work I did with the San Diego Sheriff's Department in terms of firearms analysis, operability, handling characteristics, distance determinations, and shooting reconstructions.
Gunshot residue patterns?
That would be
part of
an
it?
aspect, yes. Distance determinations.
And trajectory analysis.
Correct.
Did you do any contract work for the San Diego Sheriff's Crime Laboratory?
In terms of, prior to my being hired by the San Diego Sheriff's Regional Crime Laboratory, I performed contract work as a contract laboratory for the Sheriff's Department.
And was that for 2 years, from October of 97 to May of 99?
That sounds about right.
Did you tell us about being a range master and an armorer before in your testimony?
That was part of my duties for the City of La Mesa Police Department.
Okay. Did you tell us, though, what a range master does?
A range master, also known as a firearms instructor, conducts firearms training in terms of marksmanship, limited tactics, firearms-related tactics, qualifications of the individual officers. Our department ran those qualifications 4 times a year, remedial training as necessary, also too in terms of training under multiple type of environments, as we would refer to those, firing from distant distances, different conditions, different styles of holsters, different lighting conditions, so on and so forth. Typical aspects that an officer could be expected to experience during the course of their in-field experience.
And are you also a master gunsmith?
Yes, I am.
And what about from 2003 to the present, do you do any work with Westview High School as a marksmanship coach?
I am a volunteer coach with the junior ROTC unit at Westview High School. I coach national winning 3-position air rifle teams.
Okay. Do you have any professional licenses and certifications?
Yes, I do.
Could you please tell us about those?
I am certified by the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners, often referred to as AFTE. That is the certifying body within the United States for firearms examiners. As such, I am a distinguished member with that organization. I am also one of approximately 125 people currently now within the United States that hold a certification in one of their recognized disciplines, such as the certifications that I hold are firearms evidence examination, identification, gunshot residue, and distance determination. I have also been certified by the state of California Peace Officers Standards of Training as a law enforcement range master, as well as the California Department of Consumer Affairs as an instructor in the areas of firearms. I have been certified, trained by the National Rifle Association of America in the areas of rifle, pistol, shotgun, personal protection, and home firearms. I've also been factory trained and certified as a firearms armorer on over 30 different firearm model lines.
Have you had any publications, or have you published before, if that's the correct terminology?
I have been published, yes.
And tell us about that.
Specifically, I don't remember all those publications. Typically, they revolve firearms and or firearm shooting reconstruction aspects. Generally, most of those have been in the journals produced by the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners.
From looking at your resume, in addition to the firearms publications that you've made, there's one that caught my attention and is of some interest to me, golf ball firing attachment. What's that about?
That was a device that was originally produced as part of our duties with the Firearms Analysis Unit. Whenever there would be a gun show in town, the Sheriff's Department was in charge of enforcing the California as well as local laws. The laboratory team would often participate in that. During one of our gun show events, one of the examiners found what was described as a golf ball firing device. I had to purchase one and subsequently wrote an article on it. Basically, this was a device which would replace a flash hider using the same threaded system on the end of a barrel, such as an AR-15 or a comparable firearm that fired blank cartridges. These blank cartridges would propel a golf ball, which is inserted on the end of the attachment, over extended distances. The focus of the article discussed in brief the general exterior ballistics associated with the golf ball, as well as evidence aspects such as the combustion and gunshot residue debris that could be located on the golf ball surface.
Okay. Have you given any presentations in your career as well?
Yes, I have.
And just give us a rundown of some of the groups you've presented to.
I have presented to various police departments as well as public defender agencies. I teach, present classes to a number of instructors for the law colleges in the area. I have been hired as a consultant, offered consulting services to the City of Oceanside Police Department and various groups along those lines, generally related to public defender agencies in the San Diego area, Los Angeles area, as well as some of the police agencies and even district attorney associations.
Okay, so you've, for example, presented to the California Innocence Project, correct?
I have, yes.
And the San Diego District Attorney's Office, correct?
I have.
U.S. Border Patrol, San Diego Critical Incident Investigation Team?
Yes, I did.
Among other groups, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Have you received any recognition or awards and commendations in your career?
I have, yes.
And just give us a brief rundown of those.
I have been recognized by the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners as a distinguished member. I have been recognized by the San Diego Sheriff's Department for outstanding contributions to a forensic investigation, as well as on a different case recognized by the Federal Bureau of Investigation for my work on a case involving a shooting on the Camp Pendleton Marine Corps base, recognized by the FBI for, again, outstanding contributions to a forensic investigation. Also, in terms of recognition, I do have my certifications by the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners, which are limited to currently only 125 people in the United States.
And do you currently also engage in specialized training and continuing education?
Yes, I do, to keep current within my
field. And you have
field.
about 2 pages of that, which I think the court will be upset with me if we go down that list, but you continue to do that, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And just give us a brief synopsis of any professional associations you belong to.
I either hold membership or have held membership in the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners, the Association for Crime Scene Reconstruction, the International Association for Identification, the International Wound Ballistics Association, California Association of Criminalists, informally with the Southern California Firearms Study Group.
Okay. And have you been qualified to testify as an expert witness in the past?
Yes, I have.
And can you give us an example of where you've been qualified to testify as an expert witness?
I have been qualified within the state of California in state courts. When we had, prior to that, when we had the municipal court system, in federal court, in military court martials, as well as federal courts and hearings.
And would that include the United States Federal Administrative Hearings with INS?
Yes, it would.
And United States Federal Grand Jury?
It would.
So you've testified in state and federal courts as an expert witness, correct?
Yes, I have.
All right, let's turn your attention to the matter at hand. What materials, let me mark your report. You prepared a report, have you not, in connection with your review of the matters in this case?
Yes, I did.
Defense Exhibit JJ, this report. May I approach, Your Honor?
Sure.
Showing you it's marked as Defendant's Exhibit JJ, could you please look at that and identify that?
This appears to be the report that I authored and also signed and dated on 1/3 of 2015.
And that's the report that you authored and forwarded to me, correct?
That is correct, yes.
January 3rd of 2015, correct?
Correct.
On page 3, is it enumerated the materials that you reviewed and the evidence evaluated?
That is correct.
And again, could you just give us a brief synopsis of what you reviewed in this particular case to assist you in rendering an opinion?
I had the opportunity to review a number of police reports, witness statements, reconstruction work, or actually I should say more accurately, trajectories determinations that were provided and performed by the Bureau of Criminal Investigations, BCI. Incident scene diagrams, which they generated, the firearm operability, cartridge case comparisons, which were attempted by both BCI as well as another forensic entity. I had the opportunity to review a number of scene photographs involving vehicles, evidence, locations, some of the general topography of the shooting scene area. I had the chance to review the autopsy photographs as well as the autopsy reports, the mannequins which were produced by the medical examiner's office. And there were some other consultations that I performed, discussed with Dr. David Posey, who is a medical pathologist, medical doctor, reports by Dr. Philo, and also to Susan Rowe, who is also a medical pathologist.
Do you recall if you were given a thumb drive of all this information rather than just a big pile of documents?
Yes, that's. I typically work with thumb drives and CD-ROMs.
So these are the documents that you've had an opportunity to review, and could you please, well, first of all, let me ask you, do you have opinions in this case based on reasonable scientific certainty in the area of forensic science and your area of expertise? So do you have opinions based on reasonable scientific certainty as to the events that occurred on November 29, 2012 relative to a shooting reconstruction?
Yes, I do.
So please state to us your findings in that respect and your observations.
Referring to my report, a lot of those observations, conclusions are discussed, presented throughout the body of my report.
So, for example, if we go to the first paragraph of the findings and observations, you opine on the bullets and whether or not there's been any ballistics matchup in this case with all the weapons fired, correct?
That is correct.
And based upon your review of the BCI reports and all the other expert reports, what conclusions have you come to?
that they were unable to identify any specific projectile to a specific firearm.
Have you stated that it cannot be established with any degree of scientific certainty which bullet was fired by which gun, where the shooter was located for that specific shot, and where that specific bullet struck the occupant of the Malibu, or even if it did strike an occupant of the bullet park?
That would be correct.
Okay, so how has it been that that's what your opinion is as you go on for 27 pages here with opinions?
There are a number of aspects which allow me to compare the physical evidence which is documented within the scene to suspected actions by certain individuals, to some degree more solid than others. I can identify things which did happen or did not happen, and there are some aspects of the reconstruction which are inconclusive. I can give you a range of possibility, a relatively narrow range, but I can't tell you for a fact this one and only aspect occurred at that point in time.
Is there a certain art form involved in shooting reconstruction over and above the science of it?
Yes, there is.
So in this particular case, although you can't just testify that you can't make specific determinations, you have gone at length to give us what your findings are based on reasonable scientific certainty as you postulate, correct?
That is correct, yes.
All right. What did you find relative to the lighting conditions at the scene of the shooting incident?
The shooting incident took place at night under nighttime conditions. There was present lighting in the general area of the shooting. There were also headlights from headlight illumination, as well as illumination provided by the emergency lights, the light bars present on top of the, I guess locally you refer to those as zone cars, specifically zone car 217 and 238, immediate to the Malibu vehicle, as well as other vehicles within the immediate vicinity.
Have you gone to the scene where the shooting occurred?
Yes, I have.
And that happened last night?
Yes, it did.
Was it approximately 10 p.m.?
Approximately, yes.
And it was obviously nighttime, correct?
It was.
And did your going to the scene assist you in any way?
Objection.
Let me think about that for a second. Sustained.
As a result of going to the scene, do you want to change any of the opinions that you've rendered in this case?
Objection.
Overruled.
As a result of going to the scene, I do not wish to change any of my determinations, my conclusions.
Did it help put things in context for you?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is reduced visual acuity a significant issue in a shooting reconstruction?
Objection.
Overruled.
It can be, yes.
And why is that?
As part of a shooting reconstruction, there are many aspects that must be considered. It's not a single discipline science. One of those is lighting conditions, the effects on existing light, the type of existing light, how the body perceives or sees under those light conditions, the objects being visualized. We had the emergency lights activated on units 217, 238, in very close proximity to Officer Brelo and the adjacent officers. That would have an impact on their visual acuity. The condition of the windshield of the Malibu, as the glass of the windshield became fractured.
Objection.
Overruled.
As the glass of the windshield became fractured, that would affect an individual's ability above the other environmental factors to perceive the events within the vehicle.
What would be the effect of a bullet penetrating the windshield of the manslaughter?
The effect on the windshield or on the ability of the person looking through it to see?
Effect on the windshield, Your Honor.
Overruled.
As windshield glass is different than other forms of typical glass which is typically encountered. It is a laminate type of glass. You have a thin layer of glass which is sandwiched on either side of a plastic layer. This glass, a windshield, when struck by a bullet, fractures in a different pattern as a bullet passes through or ricochets off of it. Typically, the bullet passes through the glass, creates a crushed area which is maintained, held on to by the plastic laminate layer, with the exception of the area of the bullet which actually passes through, typically as a firearms projectile such as 9mm passes through a windshield. It will deform, possibly fragment. This enlargement, deformation of the bullet causes a larger impact, therefore a damaged area. This distorts the windshield. The force of the impact causes several physical reactions to the windshield itself. You have crushed glass particles which are expelled from the outside. If you have a shooter shooting from the outside to the inside of the vehicle, of the windshield, you have glass fragments which are thrown off of the face of the windshield to the exterior surface. You have glass fragments which are also thrown off of the inner surface of the windshield into the passenger compartment. The windshield also flexes, it actually vibrates, moves under the impacts, and unlike safety glass or other types of glass such as float glass, the breakage, the fracture characteristics are different.
With those factors that you've just enumerated, relate to reduced visual acuity or visual misperceptions that officers may have?
Well, as each projectile strikes and damages the windshield, and the windshield responds by flexing, by moving, by changing the angle of impact by any type of light, light striking that object will be reflected differently.
Objection.
Overruled.
Plus you have the interference caused by the glass particles being ejected, thrown off of the windshield into the field of vision. There are a number of factors here that can affect the visual acuity, the perception of an external observer.
And from your years of experience as a law enforcement officer and also as an expert, in fact, do the overhead emergency flashing lights create perceptual distortions at times?
Objection.
Visual perceptual distortions.
Sustained.
What effect does an overhead emergency flashing light at nighttime have on officers in the field when they're facing the emergency overhead light?
Sustained.
Mr. Martini, I'd like to direct your attention to the number of shots that were fired relative to the shell casings recovered. What did you find with regard to that subject?
During the course of the investigation, there were a number of expended cartridge cases which were recovered and submitted to BCI for examination purposes. There was also counts, firearm capacity counts performed as part of the investigation. As a result, you look at the number of expended cartridge cases recovered, and that's approximately in the area of 123, 122, depending on exactly what you're looking at. But in terms of the firearm capacity count, you have up to 139 possible cartridges, possible shots, which were discharged during that event.
So there was a difference between the number of casings found and the number of shots fired, correct?
That is correct.
And that's not unusual, though, when you're dealing with an outside environment like this where shooting occurs?
That's fairly typical, yes.
And why is that?
Well, number one, because you have such a varied topography, you have cartridge cases that may end up bouncing and rolling into gutters. They may be stepped on and pushed into soil, grass. You also have a number of individuals, law enforcement personnel, emergency medical personnel, which are navigating through the scene, either during the course of the shooting or subsequent to the shooting. You have situations where expended cartridge cases could become trapped within the lugs of on the soles of their boots, their footwear. There are also the possibility, which is relatively common when you have firing officers alongside of each other, where cartridge cases can be trapped within clothing, jackets, pockets, shirts, and then subsequently found later but not collected at the shooting scene.
So basically there was a difference of 16. There were 139 shots that were accounted for by counting the officers' weapons, their cartridge counts, versus 123 cartridge cases recovered.
Correct.
So there's, for another way to put it, approximately 16 cartridge cases that are missing in this case.
Approximately.
Relative to the examination of the Malibu itself, what were your findings relative to the number of bullet holes that were found on that vehicle?
After reviewing the BCI investigation report, they established that there were 92 identical impacts to the body of the vehicle, as well as 5 impacts that could be associated in the interior of the vehicle, for a total of 97 projectile strikes. If you compare 97 projectile strikes, which are identified, to a possible 139 shots fired, then you have 42 shots which are unaccounted for in one aspect or another.
Is that a pretty large number of unaccounted shots?
I would consider it so, yes.
What did you conclude relative to whether or not some of these additional bullets entered the vehicle?
Based on the examination of the incident scene photographs, as well as the BCI investigation, yes, I would expect for a number of projectiles, bullets, to enter the vehicle, possibly through a previously broken window or a partially broken window, which is not fully collapsed, and then either struck the occupants or possibly even exited the other side.
Do you have any estimates to the number of bullets that may have entered the Malibu through open or shattered glass windows that were open?
Other than establishing that there were some, as to the number, I can't say for sure.
And of the 139 shots that were fired, how many can be reliably established using trajectory rods?
The BCI established 30 trajectories which struck the Malibu, and actually 2 that struck the zone car 238 that could be reliably determined by use of trajectory rods.
So there were only 30 bullets that struck a Malibu that you can reliably determine using trajectory rods?
This is based on the BCI report, yes.
And with respect to the trajectory rods, what could you tell us about that relative to whether there's any margin of error in their usage?
Absolutely. The trajectory rod is an approximation of the trajectory of the bullet path as it passes through various materials. In this case, we're talking about vehicle-related materials such as windshield, dash components, possible sheet metal such as associated with the side panels or the roof, components such as that. Typically, when you're using trajectory rods, you need 2 points of reference, or if you're using a single point of reference, such as in sheet metal, if it's sufficient in quality. In other words, there's directional components which are sufficient to establishing a trajectory, reliable trajectory. Those can be used also.
And were you mentioning the margin of error and whether that you have to use a cone?
It's really another way of phrasing the question previously asked and not exactly answered.
To continue, the trajectory rods or the trajectory determination is the best approximation based on the physical evidence. It is well accepted within the forensic discipline that trajectory determinations come with a plus or minus 5 degrees worth of error for that trajectory within any plane. So to best represent, most accurately represent a trajectory, you have the established trajectory line, which is the center point to a cone which surrounds that and represents the plus or minus 5 degrees worth of error.
Pardon me. Sir, we're not going to complete your testimony today, so if you kindly be ready to take the stand at 9:15 tomorrow morning and you remain under oath, you're welcome to depart at this point.
Thank you.
So we'll go on the record at 9:15 tomorrow. Wednesday, we're off in the morning, and I suppose, depending on what we get through tomorrow, possibly all day, we'll see. But certainly Wednesday off in the morning. I have 16 or so other hearings, and we'll, depending on what witnesses the defense has, possibly all day. Thank you. We're off the record.
Just for the court,
On the record or not?
and for Harvey's understanding of witnesses, we have complete examination of this witness, and we also have
Martinelli.
supports expert Martinelli. And that's it. We won't have our next witness until
Thursday.
Wednesday.
Oh, I think it said Thursday.
Then we have Dr. Rowe, medical examiner.
Oh, okay.
And we also have Dr. Johnson, a psychologist, for Wednesday.
Also, neither of those two can be available tomorrow?
No, they're not getting it until Wednesday, and I think Dr. Rowe has to leave Wednesday night, so I think we'll put her on first, and then follow up by Johnson.
Okay.
Thursday morning. Well, we're going to try to get them out. I don't know how long it's going to take. We'd like to get them out Wednesday. On Wednesday, we'd like to include both of those.
That long to me.
And then Dr. Posey's Thursday. And I think
Okay,
that's-
so we will be in session on Wednesday afternoon, but not morning.
So it's not like tomorrow afternoon anyhow.
We're going to finish the martini and then Martinelli, and that's it for us.
Yeah, tomorrow afternoon, we could get out early tomorrow, I guess is what it looks like. Exhibit U is up here. This looks like an original, so FYI.
Yes.